you are.
Oh, you're looking for me. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yes,
I
there
didn't
you
want to
are.
frighten you. I didn't want to frighten you, but yeah, here I am.
Oh, okay.
I just
I'm
had your
sorry. I
face.
just
No, that's okay.
yeah,
I
it
just had
just
your
went.
face
It
going.
just went. Yeah, it just went blank, and I heard absolute silence. I said, "Oh, okay.
All right, well that's
I'm
cool. Well,
here
we're
by
back.
myself."
No, we're
Yeah.
back. We're back. So I don't know if you heard the question, but basically, like when you were like a young kid, like really young in school, elementary school, did you have in your head, I think I'm going to go ahead and be a record producer or get into music, or how did that all start for you from the beginning?
No, actually, I'm originally from Texas, and it started a little bit different for me. And I guess most people that came up in my age group that was from the South, a lot of music was in the church. So
Hmm.
my aunt was, one of the matriarchs in church that played keyboards in the church. So every Sunday, that's what we did. We sang in the church and did that. And as I grew up, I just heard a lot of music from that. And I had one of my cousins. He was a singer and producer, a gentleman named Bobby Sanders. He had a group called Young Hearts. He also worked quite a bit with Lil Anthony and the Imperials. So I used to watch them rehearse. I used to watch them sing. And I said, one day I want to grow up and I want to have, I know this sounds superficial, but I said, one day when I grow up, I want to have the nice cars and the nice clothes. And I watched him doing the doo wop. And I said, man, I want to do that. So he said, okay, when you finish school, I'm going to help you with your music.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
It always seems that you need to know someone in the music business. My undergraduate degree is in music. I graduated from the School of Performing Arts for the city of New York out of Brooklyn College, and and I wanted to be in the recording business. That's really what I love doing. Way back when, how exciting that was. I mean, it's not like it is today where you have 10,000 tracks and you pop a button. You were doing
right.
multiple track recordings and bouncing things back and forth. And you had to have a game plan. And it really, when they talk about producing a record, you really had to produce the record back then because you'd run out of room
Let,
and,
let me ask you a question, Michael. Even
uh-huh.
before that, I mean, what even before that, what inspired you to even want to do music? I mean, did you have somebody in your family or somebody that you looked up to or somebody on TV that you saw with an instrument?
Nothing. It's
What?
so haphazard and accidental. I took a test when I was in elementary school, like in the third grade or fourth grade, and it was a music test. And it scored very high on the music test. I didn't particularly have anything at home. I remember doing piano lessons when I was like 6 or 7, and I hated it. I couldn't wait to go watch TV or something. But I did well on this music test. So they said, we want to put your son in the fifth grade into a music program. And my father said, okay. And I said, hey, Dad, what instrument should I play? And he said, I think xylophone or tenor sax. So I went over to the music instructor. This is a New York City school system. I said, I want to play xylophone or tenor sax. He said, well, we don't have xylophone and we don't have a tenor sax. How does clarinet sound to you? And I said, okay. And I was not really good at clarinet in particular. And about halfway through that year, the music teacher came over and he says, the school just bought an alto sax. Do you want to go ahead and play it? And I said, yeah, sure. And I took to the instrument. I just took to the instrument. I was pretty good at it, and I don't know why. I'm the type of guy that in high school, for instance, my average in high school was always in the 80s, yet I never got a grade in the 80s. I was either flunking the thing or nearly flunking the thing or doing unbelievably well in it. And I didn't, I wasn't into studying or anything like that at all. So I started to play it. And the thing that really was the kicker is like that first year, all I did was play scales, rudimentary music, up and down, boring as hell, just boring as hell. And then the teacher said, you want to go to the sixth grade orchestra? Sixth grade orchestra did it for me. I remember sitting in the room and being overwhelmed when I heard harmony and counterpoint. I mean, I remember my heart throbbing out of my chest. I would say was my first sexual experience almost. It was just such. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how it rattled my head and what it did to me inside. And I continued with it. And So that was my start, and it really was very haphazard. I just happened to be, I guess, in the right place at the right time with the right instrument. But
Yeah, I think ours, my background is somewhat similar because the little place that I came from in Texas, either you played music, played sports, or picked cotton. So, so I chose music, and then even in my beginning, they gave me a flute. That wasn't cool enough. I didn't really like that. They gave me a clarinet. I didn't like that. That wasn't cool enough either. And then they came up with the alto and the tenor sax, and I said, okay, that sounds kind of cool. And then I started looking at guys like Stanley Clark, Stanley Turrentine, some of the old horn players, and I said, oh
mhm.
yeah, and they playing jazz. And I said, oh, okay, I can do that. So I ended up getting stuck with a horn for a whole bunch of years. About 18 years, I played tenor sax.
Yeah,
And
well,
then one day I found out, the horn players wasn't cool because they never was out front. So I picked up a microphone.
all right. Well, I was too afraid to pick up a microphone. I have more balls now about doing it. It's funny. Now that I'm in my 60s, I think I could be really good front man. But,
Well,
but
hey, look, I was in high school the first time I sang in front of a large number of people, and once you walk out on the stage and look at a whole lot of people, you got two choices. Either you can come with it or run off the stage.
that's
So,
it.
I got up my nerve and I got through the first verse. And after that, my chest started sticking out. And the greatest thing that happened after I got through the whole song, after that, I was walking through like a little schoolyard after the little auditorium, little show. And all the little girls saying, that's that guy. That's that guy that was singing. That's the guy who was singing. So that kind of cinched it for me from right there. I know that sounds crazy, but that kind of
No,
did it for
that's
me.
there's a lot of people who did that, that I know of. That they're not famous musicians or anything, but they go, hey man, I want to get some girls. Let me go ahead and pick up guitar, or do something, and they can hang out at the beach then, and they're strumming away, and the girls are coming by, and
Well,
that
if you
was
played music, you went to all the sporting events in school. You went the band went everywhere the teams went.
That's right. So you're doing this for a long time. You're working with some really really good people. As I read through like the bio you sent to me, Aaron Neville, Tina Turner, Marvin Gaye, Quincy Jones. Is there any like one person you could tell us a little something about that kind of stuck with you? Either words of advice
Well,
or just a
well, I
story,
think
anything.
all of them. I think all of them because I came into it kind of like a young age, and it was kind of haphazardly that like I met Tina Turner.
Hmm.
I met her from another friend of mine. I just happened to be riding with him one day, and he said I got to make a stop, and we went by, where Tina and Ike were staying at the time, and I got to meet them personally. And some years later, I got to record a song in Ike's studio, which is kind of was a scary incident because I'd never had anybody pull a gun on me in my life until then.
Ooh,
Over
was
some
that?
studio, over some studio time, over hours worth of studio time.
All right.
But
As long as he didn't, it wasn't you singing,
no, no. Later on in life, we met again. Under our happier terms. After I
Uh-huh.
had kind of grew up a little bit and kind of came into my own. But along the way, I've had some very helpful people, and it kind of helped mold my mindset too. Is to leave the ladder down. They always told me to leave the ladder down so somebody else can come up. Never
Hmm.
get too big headed that you can't help someone else.
Yeah.
And I always remembered that.
Oh, that's a good piece to remember. I've not had much experience meeting people of real fame. Um, I've talked to a couple of heavy duty musicians who for a little while. I met Buddy Rich. My favorite though is I did meet James Brown once, and it was really weird. I was in LaGuardia Airport of all places with my brother, and he says, "Is that James Brown over there?" And I said, "Damn, that is James Brown." And I went over to him and I said, "Mr. Brown." He turned around and said, "Look, I don't got the color, but I got the soul." And he said to me, "Hey man, you all right?" And I'll just, I just never forget it. And but that's my experiences with famous. What kind of work did you do with Quincy
Well,
Jones?
Well, we worked. I worked on Back on the Block. That album did with Al B. Sure, Bill Summers, Nathan East, Sting was involved in that project. I think Michael even did some on that Back on the Block project. I mean, it was one of the most fantastic projects that I ever worked on. You know, to meet such a large group of people that were all down to earth. You know, we had one thing in common was the music.
Yeah. Well, some people say music is like the universal language.
I certainly agree.
As a dentist,
I certainly agree with
pain.
that.
I think pain is the universal language. You know, as a dentist, that's kind of right. Because maybe you may not like some guy's music. You know what I mean? But someone who's hurting is hurting, and everyone understands that and goes with it. But music definitely is it affected me and my soul. That's why I still do it. It's odd for me, Lamont, that even today, I'm a doctor for 30 years. When people call me Dr. Blum, I think they're talking about someone else. You know, I relate so much more to the musical aspects, and I taught neurologically impaired and emotionally disturbed children for about 7 years, New York City school system, and I just relate to those things, and I think there's we talked yesterday about cooking a little bit. I look at cooking as music
Yeah.
too.
You know what? You know what, Michael? I think that's because the doctor thing is just something that you do, but that's not all you do.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of people just get one thing that they can do and do well, but it's I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse when you can do a lot of things well.
Well, you get that master of none kind of thing. I mean, you look at really some great musicians like Leonard Bernstein. Leonard Bernstein could have been a great conductor, but he's not considered one. He could have been considered a great pianist, but he's not considered one. And he could have been a great songwriter, and he's not considered one. But no one denies the man's talent.
Who's doing the considering? Who's doing the considering though?
Well,
See,
that's
that's the
that's true.
thing.
That's true. I guess it's all beauty is in the eye of the beholder or in the ear of the beholder.
Yeah, it's all relative. It's all relative.
It is all relative, Lamont. You're 100% right. But the people who consider those people, the experts, quote unquote, in the field and all of that. But
Yeah.
talent is talent, and raw talent. If I said to my wife once, I said, if I could sing like Stevie Wonder, there's a very good chance that we would be paupers because there's a lot of people who can sing really, really well and they just never get noticed. And they wind up doing some other job. They hear back it up, or whatever, some other kind of job that they're doing. In other words, like I felt that some people's talent is so strong they have no choice. You know, they
Well, you know what? That there's a whole myriad of reasons for that. I haven't been a producer, haven't been a manager. You know, there's a whole lot of great talent out there, but some people just can't work with. They just don't have the mindset. You know, they got a God-given talent, but they just don't want to do that. What about those?
Yep,
I've
well,
read
you get
into a
that.
ton of those.
Yeah, I had a friend that I worked. He worked in a lounge band playing dance music in a hotel in upstate New York, and the guy was a brilliant musician, really brilliant musician, and he wanted to do chiropractic. I mean, absolute pitch. I remember taking my hands and smashing them down on a piano keyboard and leaving one note out. And I'd ask him, what note did I leave out? And he could tell, because some people just have an ear like that. And it makes sense. I mean, you know what green is, and you know what red is. Why not know what a B flat is and a G is? You know what I mean? They're well, you don't really see anything physically anyway. I mean, the room here I'm in looks green, but that's only because a vibration of light is hitting my eye, going to my brain upside down, and I translate it. It's the same thing with music is the same way. It's just a vibratory experience, and some people can pick it out and just really run with it. Um, and that's one of the reasons I think, in a way, that I'm not a musician is that I had drummed into my head that you had to be great, and if you weren't great, why bother? And there are a lot of very
Well,
successful musicians that aren't great, but they're doing what they love.
how about a lot of great musicians that can't read?
That's amazing to me too. The probably one I mentioned was Buddy Rich. Buddy Rich would hear something one time and then play it, and that's it.
Yeah.
He would just it clicked. Some things just click for some people. Same thing with cooking. You know, you can. I've seen people taste something and they can tell you the 10 ingredients in it. You know, I mean, it's just works that well for them. It really.
I know. I was always amazed at wine tasters.
Hmm. Right, and it always sounds like the same bullshit, doesn't it? They're like, has a little bit of oak, and a little tannin in it, with a
Yeah,
hint
yeah,
of a rosewood
yeah.
and strawberry. You know, oh please, it's
Exactly,
wine. You know, I
exactly.
mean, what is this?
You know, half the stuff they mention we ain't never heard of.
That's right. You know, and everything seems to be like that with them, but they get it. There's something they got going
Yeah.
on that I I certainly don't have. So. So you've been doing
It's
this. I know
amazing.
you made a switch somewhere along to get into. You said you were doing film, I imagine television, and that. How did that happen? How did what was the break between it? Was it an easy transition? Did you? How did that all work?
Kind of like I mentioned before, that everybody that does music ultimately want to do film and TV, and it's the same. You've never seen a TV show or seen any movie that you didn't hear music in.
Hmm.
So, being a music producer, a record label, we always try to produce music for soundtracks or even to be, considered in some type of movie or film. So it was just I know one hand just kind of grabs the other. It's kind of hard to be really seriously involved in one and not eventually get involved in some form of fashion. I
Hmm.
started out with the music, of course, doing music for TV and film, and it doesn't take long for you to decide, okay, well maybe I need to get in front of the camera too, just to break things up a little bit.
All right, so that worked for you well. No one ever came to, I never felt that way or could do that. So the only thing I wanted to do with film, actually, for a while, I was very interested in doing music for film. Um, there's a
Hmm.
there's a big band guy. His name is Don Ellis. He was at the end of the big band era, and he had a band that was known for doing things in odd meters. And so he had something like live in 3 2/3 fourth time was the name of one of the records he did. But he would do things in all sorts of bizarre meters, and he wound up getting into film. And I kind of followed him with that. Unfortunately, although I had some uh, of a relationship with him, he died of a heart attack rather young, and I
Wow.
never, I never really pursued it. But it wasn't
Never too
getting.
late.
Well, that's what they say, but man, I'm feeling old sometimes, Lamont. I got to tell you, really.
It's all it's look, it's all in your head. Today is my birthday actually, so it's
That's
all in
right.
your
Happy
head.
birthday to you. That's right. Should get some music going here for your
Yeah.
birthday. So, what did you do to celebrate?
I'm talking to you.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, look, I'm talking. Hey, look, I'm talking to you doing the favorite thing that I like to do. You know what I mean? Expand the brand, talk to other like-minded people, talk about the things that we have in common, and each one teach one. So everybody I talk to, I try to share something, and I try to learn something from.
That's awesome.
So,
I'm curious. Do you think you could have done what you did if you stayed and lived in Texas?
absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not, because the opportunities they just wasn't there. I mean, in the '50s, I'm a '50s child, not to date myself, but in the '50s, the opportunities just wasn't there. My parents moved me to California because of the education, because of the opportunities that was available here
Mm-hmm.
in California.
So,
So I got to run back and forth, pretty much of my life, but I'm very happy that they had the foresight to do that.
yeah, that's people had told me that when I was younger that I shouldn't be in New York. That if I really wanted to do something in entertainment, that I needed to be in L.A. And I loved New York. I just
Right.
didn't want to leave it. So I was there. And for me it was tough. I mean, I remember going paving, pounding the pavement, going to publishers and all of that, and it was really difficult. And as a sideman, if you're doing Broadway or whatever, you kind of Sometimes waiting for someone to get hit in the face with an object. Do you know what I mean? And then they're out, so the
Hmm.
contractor now is looking for the next person. Because usually, once you get into some of those jobs, like a friend of mine who's one of the pit drummers on Broadway, he's what was the big show he did? Oh, Mamma Mia. He did Mamma Mia for almost its entire
Oh,
run,
okay.
you know, and for someone to get into the position he was in, he literally had to be sick or ill or out of it, you know. And
Wow.
he was also drummer on Rosie O'Donnell's show, so he did really well. Um, and
Yeah.
he was in New York. He was in, so I guess there's no excuses. You know, I don't like to make excuses for anything. I always feel that everyone is where they are because of who they are and what they've done. You know, I mean,
Yeah, there's always a reason for it. I had a similar experience. I had moved to Las Vegas, and I had this idea that I was going to go to Vegas and develop some talent, produce them, and just so I can say I got some artists that I came out of there, and I ended up going there and being very disappointed. I found out that it wasn't what I thought it was.
hmm
They were doing a lot of tribute shows and stuff, and a lot of artists that are already established. They've been there for years, but they just wasn't breaking any new talent. So I had to come back here and get in the trenches where people are doing what I'm doing.
sure,
So you kind of had to like go. That kind of goes back to what you're saying. If you want to do something, you kind of got to surround yourself with the people that are actually doing that.
yeah, yeah. I guess that's, eh, you know, we, we we didn't talk about spirituality here on this show just a little bit before we went on the air, but they say spiritually, although people think they have free will, they really don't. The only free will you really have is who you hang out with.
Yeah,
That's the thing you really. That's what you can actually do in your life, and that's what can help you control yourself and move forward or backwards. Some people make some really bad decisions with who they're going to hang out with too, and but that's what free will really means. So um, I'm curious also how or why, or was it just a natural thing with you getting involved with kids?
well, true story. Um, in 1995, I let my son go to a video shoot here in Los Angeles, California. Um, and actually, no, I didn't. Let me back that up. Actually, I didn't let him go. I let him go down to a friend's house, lived down the next block from where I was living at the time. And that's what he told me. I was in the studio recording, and he came back and said, Dad, I want to go down to my friend's house. I'll be back in a little while. I said, okay, we'll be back before dark, like most parents do. Unbeknownst to me, one of his school friends came by his friend's house with their sister's car, and they all jumped in the car and they go to one of Ice Cube's video shoots. And some fool, some clown, was shooting a gun up in the air, and my son caught a stray bullet, and he didn't make it home.
Oh shit!
So, I kind of checked out. I kind of checked out of the business for about 2 years. I couldn't work with that. I didn't want to produce any rap. I didn't want to do no hip hop. Actually, I didn't want to do anything. Because I did everything in my power. To keep my son away from all of that, and to have him become a victim of the same thing that I kept him out of. I mean, Shaka Khan is his godmother. I
hmm
mean, he's always been in the music stuff with me. So anyway, after all of that, my daughter snapped me one day and said, Dad, what about me? It kind of brought me out of all of that. And I started back working again, and I started doing a lot of stuff, involving kids, mentoring kids. I came up with a show called Pop Kids, which was a show for kids to teach them how to do, interviewing, how to be talk show hosts, and just so on and so forth. It's just, I always believe kids are our future. And if we don't take the time to spend time with kids to help give them the direction or give them the advantage that some of us didn't have, where else are they going to get it from?
Sure, sure. Well,
So,
kind of, I think they make it up as they go if they don't get it from their parents. I mean, they do the best they can like anyone
Oh,
else does,
absolutely. I mean,
you know?
look at the news and look at the gang activity and look at all that stuff. Children have a way to daddy themselves or father themselves. If they don't have a family structure or a strong support mechanism, they're going to find it somewhere. And a lot of times they don't find it in the right places.
Yeah, and sometimes the parents don't help. Like when I was teaching, I was an inner city school teacher. Um, and two things that kind of struck me once was an assignment to go ahead and draw your favorite room in your house. And this kid drew his living room, and on the top of the TV, clear as a bell, was like it was a triple beam scale.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so they say if you want the truth, ask a child or an idiot. Yes, so
Oh, exactly. Exactly. A child's going to tell the truth.
right. So that's never went anywhere. But I mean, obviously there was something going on in the house. And the other thing, which
Yes.
was almost sad, was I had asked a class and they couldn't read or write well, so it was pretty much they would just talk and tell me what it was about what they think their future will be like. And one girl who was a relatively limited intelligence, but she said, "I'm going to get married to some man. He's going to leave the house. I'll go on welfare like my mom and my grandma."
Wow. She got her script already written, huh?
Done, done, done.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so you you need to be lucky in many many ways. I always say sometimes even a dog needs to be lucky. You got to be in the right house with the right people. So here I am, some white Jewish boy, and my parents are supporting me in music. That's rare, you know. I mean, like normally a parent would
But
say the
even
other.
that's a blessing. Even that was a blessing.
That was a blessing too. That was a blessing too.
Yes.
I don't know if you'd call it white privilege. I don't believe in that. I think there's just you just move yourself forward and live your life, and don't consider yourself a victim. You
Right.
just move it forward all the time, all the time. Um, your mindset really can destroy you, or it can make you be successful. So,
Yeah, we kind of touched on it yesterday a little bit. I kind of hope that they could really put the arts back into schools. From the elementary level.
hmm
And more children will be exposed to have choirs and bands and like we did when we were coming up. We had choir and band and at a very young age, and we learned harmony and
hmm
counterpoint, some of the stuff that you had mentioned. I mean, we learned that at an early age, and I think at the invent of computers in the digital age, I think we lost a lot of would-be musicians, and a lot of the old school cats. They kind of like was kind of stubborn to make the transition because they still not computer lit today. And
sure.
I deal with a lot of cats, and I tell them to send me an MP3 or MP4, and they'll tell me okay, and then a week will go by,
hmm
and I'm still looking for this email, right?
Sure.
And it don't come, and then I guess they're too proud to tell me that they don't really know how to do that. You know what I mean?
It's you got to
And
speak the language. I had a PR kid. He was a kid, really, maybe 28 years old, working in my dental practice. This kid was a crackerjack, and he said, "Dr. Blum, this guy, he's never returning my texts. I don't know what it is. I've texted him 10 times." I said, "Hey, Kate, how old is he?" He goes, "I don't know, 55 or so." I said, "Call him on the phone." you know, and
yes,
because
yes.
you have to speak at least the same language. Um,
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that a lot of the old musicians really, don't understand that, especially the ones that don't have somebody else that's in their camp or in their crew that's younger, that's tech savvy.
hmm
Because, when we came into the business, it would take us a week, 10 days, to get a CD to Asia, anywhere. And now you could do it, what, less than 30 seconds.
Yeah, yeah.
So, the businesses can change
No question about
dramatically,
it.
over the years.
Now, sometimes things in business they change for the better. Sometimes they change for the worse. Um, we talked a little bit about even now about reading music, being able to just do those kind of rudimentary things that if you said you were a musician, you used to have a little bit of some of that under your belt. And to me,
Right.
it seems like you just don't.
Right.
You know?
Well, because more people accept computer generated sounds, it's easier for them to, sample something and, and fly it in, and every now and then you find great producers, they still want, live instruments opposed to, digital sounds. It's just a different sound,
Yeah. I
you know.
used to study. I used to study the producers, record producers. To me, there was like three types. There was a type of record producer where it didn't make a difference who the artist was. It sounded like that record producer.
Right.
To me, I don't know. Nowadays, it would be like the Wall of Sound, Phil Spector. All of his stuff
Hmm.
sounded like Phil Spector's, or even Babyface. I always felt that you could listen to Madonna
Right.
doing a Babyface. It's Babyface. That's what you're listening to. So there was that kind of
Same with
guy.
the same with the old Motown sound. You didn't have to know who it was, but you could tell the Motown sound or Philly International. Some of those old things,
Right.
you could just the Gamble and Huff
The
stuff.
Gamble and Huff
You could
stuff.
just tell. You may not even know the artist, but you can kind of tell the production behind it.
Then there were those that kind of set up the mics, made sure the sound was really good, and then just recorded the band playing live.
Right. Yeah,
And
I've done that.
so, I mean, it's like the Doobie Brothers to me sounded like that all the time. You know,
Yes.
I mean, and I heard them live, and that's what they sound like. So it was just like a representation, a good representation of what they actually were like. And then there was the type that I really admired, and what they did is they made sure that the artist sounded like the artist, but they made sure that the artist sounded like the best possible artist they could be. And so they would leave
Right.
not very heavy marks. My favorite one was some guy who most people don't know. When he died, he was considered one of the most important people in music. His name was Arif Mardin. And he produced Aretha Franklin. He produced, I mean, it was a time when he had three number one hits in the charts, top 10, and no one knows who the guy is, you know? and
Wow.
he did the Bee
Wow.
Gees. He was doing, oh gosh, he had like a whole bunch of them at the same time going on. And he was a schooled musician, a schooled trained musician. And so that was the kind of guy I wanted to be. And I could just never get into that niche. It almost seemed like you had to know somebody to get into that. Because I would go
Well,
and,
I have a saying for that, Michael. It's not who you know, it's how you know who you know.
that's a lot of wisdom in that, particularly for anyone
Oh
who's trying
yeah,
to do
think
this, huh?
about it. How many people, and I know some of your listeners can agree with this too. How many people that you know that won't open the door for you, but then you could meet a stranger tomorrow that don't know nothing about you that open up doors for you that help your career immensely.
That's it. That happens quite often. That happens quite often. I thought I knew a bunch of people. I knew the programming director from ABC Records. He was a client of my father's. I knew cousin Brucey. He lived across the street from us when he was a kid. I uh, I knew a bunch of people like that, and I called them. I knew Sal Iannucci, who was the president of Capitol Records. He signed the Beatles. Um, but none of those could turn any stones for me because they weren't. It wasn't a direct enough connection with me. It was a connection with my mother, my
Right.
father, but it wasn't a connection of mine. So so here I sit now, my third career, from music to teaching to dentistry to now relatively unemployed and just enjoying myself. Um,
Hey, that's where everybody's trying to get, right? To the point that they can just enjoy themselves.
that's it. That's it. You know, sometimes I have days and I say to myself, how the hell could I have worked? You know, I'm so busy doing whatever it is that I'm doing. How could I have for like the last 30 years been working like a, you know, I only work 4 days a week, but how could you be working like that, you know, and do all this
Well,
stuff?
I quit every day.
You quit every day?
Start back the next morning.
I've had it till tomorrow.
Yes.
And I can't stand this till later on. Um,
Exactly. Like what
I,
I got to do next.
that's it. I always looked at work as like it's like having a velvet ball and chain. You know, it provides for you, but you're dragging this piece of shit around, going through it. Unless you can make your job art. I think people who can make their job art, those are the ones who are enormously successful. And I'm not saying that's easy to do, but some people do that, and it's obvious. It's
Right.
obvious, you know. I wanted to also talk to you here. You said that I'm just reading through this that you've become a board member of Humanitarians for Sexually Abused Children.
Yes. We published, I got involved with that. I published this book through, one of our other companies, World Movement Publishing. It was actually the Bridget Harris story. I don't know if you recall her story. She was in the news. Actually, she's out of New York. She was on the news, very, very big story about 4 or 5 years ago. Of course, she had been molested for a number of years by, her father. And we secured the rights to publish the book and have getting into that story. And I got a whole lot involved in abused children, children that had been trafficked, that whole little subject. And we started to solicit other musicians and entertainers across the country to do a series of concerts so we could secure and buy buildings, so we could set up safe havens for a lot of these children and families. Because a lot of times when children go through these situations, the county and the state facilities, they'll turn around and send these kids back to another family member. And sometimes the family member is not that far away from the actual abuser.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to come up with enough funding from different places so we can set up safe havens across the country. And that's something that we're still working on today, something I'm very, very passionate about. Especially with the kids, especially with young ladies, young adults who's been going through trafficking, and people don't understand. It's still alive and a whole lot more serious than they think about. In a lot of these sweatshops across the country, illegal labor, and that's involving women and men as well. So through this organization, we hope to help a lot of that. And
Sure.
I'm reaching out through my people that's in entertainment and TV that have
I
the
did a
authority and can help.
I did an interview with with a woman who basically was her field of study was sex trafficking, and unfortunately, sometimes they do couple that with fame and fortune and music. And she said the most common scenario is they'll put an ad in the paper or Craigslist or something like that that says opportunity to record records with major artists. And she said what will happen is the person will go over to to that house or office or wherever it is. Said, and usually the first thing the guy will say is, "Are you here alone?" And if the girl says, "Well, my dad's waiting for me outside," they say, "Oh, okay, da da da," and that's the end of it. However,
Right.
if they say, "Well, yeah, I am here alone," he says that literally they'll say, "Well, come here, I want to show you something in the studio." Open up a door, throw her in there, lock them up. Says, and within 20 minutes, their friend from Russia has them on a crate on a ship going somewhere.
Wow. Wow.
So
And can you imagine that happen? That happens each and every day.
every single day, multiple times, multiple times. So I'm glad that artists get involved with that. My thing is, I was thinking of doing some types of fund me pages just to go ahead and have older musicians or people that have instruments kind of donate the instruments so that kids can use them in schools.
Right.
Um, that's something I've had in mind maybe to do now that I have some free time that I can go ahead and do something like that. But the sex trafficking and music stuff, I mean, I feel horrible when people pair that together. Like come be a star, experience some music, and then they wind up, somewhere else.
Yeah. Same thing with modeling. Same thing. They do the same thing with
Absolutely.
modeling. Same
Same
thing.
thing. Same exact thing. And I came close to that personally with my son. My son's a pretty good clarinetist. And he used to go with his junior high school music teacher up to state auditions and state band and all of that up in Tallahassee, Florida, which is a good 6 hour ride from here. And
Hmm.
we knew the guy pretty well. He had come over. We had dinner with him a whole bunch of times, and he got caught in a sex sting. His teacher got caught in a sex sting, and it was just really, really an odd experience because we knew him pretty well. He finally got the plum job he wanted to. My son had him as a middle school teacher, and he moved into one of the best prestigious band positions on the high school level. And he was now teaching my son again, and he just didn't show up from school.
Wow.
And the principal came in and said, "Well, there's some issues going on here." And we knew him, so we tried to call him. He wouldn't answer phone calls. His father happens to be a dentist, so I knew who he was up in Orlando. And he got caught in the sting, was arrested, lost his license. He was phenomenal at what he did. Kids loved him. Never any report of any abuse, but he got caught in one of these, uh, you know, Palm Beach County Sheriff stings where they put stuff up and they see who downloads it and they check the IP addresses and if it's been some type of kiddie porn or whatever. And eventually it came down to this sheriff impersonating a 12-year-old boy or a 13-year-old boy, and he set up to do a rendezvous with the boy.
Oh, wow.
And then when he
Yeah.
drove to there, he didn't feel good about it, and he drove away, and the cops stopped him anyway and he admitted everything that he did. And a sad story. And I hate to see stuff like that coupled with music, but I guess they couple it with anything that's attractive, to a kid. Anything that could
Right.
be the proverbial candy, that a kid would go ahead and
The
buy.
bait.
The,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
yeah,
bait.
absolutely, absolutely. So
Yes.
that was absolutely shocking to us. We couldn't believe it. You know someone like that. You
Right.
think you know someone like that, you really don't. So
Yeah. We always think it's going to happen somewhere else with somebody that we don't know. So it's always shocking when we find out it's right there close to you.
yeah, I mean, to me, you're talking about burying a child. I can't think of anything more horrific. You know,
No,
I just
no, it's
can't.
not.
But,
It's not the natural order of things.
no, my brother died a couple of years ago of leukemia, and my parents are alive. And the second hardest thing I had to do is because I was the older brother, I tended to do this anyway. I had to tell my parents that their son had leukemia, and then a year later, I had to tell him that he died. And
Right.
I mean, it's something no one should ever have to experience. Uh,
That's true.
yeah, no one should ever have to
That's
experience any of that. But I think we're
no,
getting
it's
kind of
not
maudlin.
natural.
We're getting maudlin here and talking about death and dying.
Well, it's
It's
all part of life. We
yeah,
have to come and then we have to go. But it's how we come and how we go that makes all the difference in the world.
yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Um, so you've done. Let's say, like, going back. I refer back to your bio sheet here, which is quite extensive. Um, you're also doing. Talk a little bit about the radio show you're doing because you're doing your own thing too.
Okay, well, I am indie, which is short from I am independent. We do that on Blog Talk every Wednesday for the past 16 years, where we interview up and coming music artists, established artists, producers, entertainment attorneys, anybody that's relative that's doing something in the music industry. We play their music, and give them some insight as best as possible. We talk about various different subjects, especially from, the old school music up until how the music business is operating today and stuff like, social networking. And I think that's a big thing today. And as far as entertainers and artists, the production, the different skills and stuff that's necessary, and the overall commitment, because there's a lot of artists out here. They look at TV and they look at videos and, they think they can go rent some jewelry and automatically they're a star the next day, but they forget the most important thing to be a great artist. You got to put in the time.
Sure,
You really do.
sure. I saw Elton John Saturday night, and boy, did someone he put in the time. He's doing this 50 years. He was belting stuff out. He's going to be 72,
Wow.
and still belting, singing really well. I mean, really, really well.
Sir
Just
Elton.
Sir Elton John. Yes, talk about a different life and a
Yeah,
different
Sir.
lifestyle and coming from a different place. I mean, that was
Rod
wicked.
Rod Stewart was one of my favorite artists.
Have you ever heard him like in a talk show? He is so personable
But
and
Rod,
so down to earth. It's amazing.
yes,
Like
yes,
he's talking about
yes.
women. I remember he said, "I like 'em toddy," like, and he's one of the wealthiest rockers around. I mean, I think if you could take away the Beatles, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, I think he may be the next one up there. And he said he just
Mhm.
loves beautiful things. If he sees a beautiful piece of art, now of course he has the money to do it, he buys it. I
Yeah,
don't
how could
doesn't
you dislike?
he
How could you
doesn't eat
do
much.
something like that?
So
But that's a look. That's a nice way to be.
that sure is. Now, you've done a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just curious, what band have you seen or what experience have you gone to in terms of theatrics or that you thought was like the most intense live performance you ever saw?
That's a tough one, Michael, because coming from an era where I was surrounded with big bands, you
Hmm.
know, we came from what 13, 14, 15 members in a band, full horn sections. I mean,
Sure.
uh, think about James Brown's earlier bands, inclusive of the Horny Horns. Think about um, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I, I I don't see a lot of that today. I think more people are really start trying to come back with instruments and
Hmm.
live music, real tight music, rhythm sections and stuff. And I'd actually like to see a lot more of that. But I think there was a period where people got like a little lazy and started doing track dates. But
Sure.
of course, as you can't do a performance with a track. It's so limited.
Hmm.
You don't have the freedom like you do in a band where you can say, hold it right there, bring it down, bring it up. You don't have those things that you could do when you're doing a track. Whatever's
Sure.
there is just there. You know, um,
Uh, when I was most active with music in the 70s, that was a crazy era because you had funk, you had rhythm and blues, you had rock, you had disco, and
yeah,
as a horn player, the rock and roll stuff, some of it I liked, but that wasn't my thing. It would be everything else. And every horn player who's ever listened to stuff became fans of Tower of Power.
Wild Cherry, Tower of Power. Lenny Williams is a real good friend of mine.
Oh, really? Is he? Wow, that's great. I know you can't see,
Yes.
but I'm wearing my Digging on James Brown T-shirt from Tower of Power. I saw them like 2 years ago. It was one of the tightest performances I've ever seen. I mean, they really still had it together, and they were
The
pumping. They were
Tower
just
of Power had a hell of a horn section, and you remember Chicago,
sure,
the group Chicago.
sure,
Remember their horn section?
yeah, well, if you call it that, yeah. You're dealing with that. That was really pop music, and Jimmy Pankow, who did the arranging, did a nice job and all of that. But any guy from
Yeah,
from from Earth, Wind and Fire could blow those guys out of the sky. Um, but
right.
um, yeah, the Tower Power horns are intense, but the rhythm section's intense too.
Yeah,
And they got a new
right, right.
front man that's like awesome. So that's the only one that I've seen consistently throughout the years. A band that I've really followed, um, and it's great. But I mean, in terms of live performances, the Doobie Brothers always did a good job. Um, Duke Ellington, you see the Duke Ellington Orchestra all the time, and they were
Oh yeah.
phenomenal. They were phenomenal. Count Basie too. Those guys. Um,
I
uh,
hate I, I hate I wasn't really around when Cab Calloway was doing his thing.
oh man, Cab Calloway's
That was a little
intense.
that was a little bit before me.
I caught the very end of Cab Calloway uh, used to play some of the hotels in upstate New York, and it was at the end of his career. And obviously, these aren't the greatest places to play in. Reminds me of Dennis Miller told a story about Don Rickles coming on his show, and his first question to Don was, he said, "So how's your career going?" He said, "I'm doing this shit, aren't I?" So it's kind of amusing, you know.
Wow,
So
wow,
so when
wow.
you see, well, that Don Rickles. When you see
Yeah,
someone like Cab Calloway, when I saw him, he was an old man already, and
right.
the magic wasn't there. But Michael's not the first one straighten his hair and fling it around. He got that from somebody.
Heidi hi, hoity
That's you
ho.
bet, you bet, you bet. So You know, yeah, no, he was great, and I imagine his performances in the heyday must have been like riveting. You know, I mean,
Oh yeah, you know that. You know
yeah,
that.
they just really, really had to be spectacular. Um, I'm coming near to the end of the segment that I do here, um, but cooking with homies. I want to talk, we talked about cooking yesterday. So you do this. Talk a little bit about that. You're into
Well,
so many things. We can go on. You know.
well, cooking with homies is one of our productions. Something that I'm happy that I got involved with. That we currently working on, and what it is, it's a celebrity-based cooking show where we take in artists from different genres that actually like to cook. You know, rap, R&B, rock, hip hop. You know, and country. Because I know as an artist, you know, you get tired of fast foods. You know, the Jack in the Box, the Burger Kings, Carl
Hmm.
Jr. So there's a lot of artists out there that like to, you know, cook. They like to maybe make their mama's spaghetti or you know, their salmon or whatever they learn how to cook at home from their parents. So, you know, they like to cook. A lot of them cook very well. So I decided to come up and do something like that. I don't know if you remember Arsenio Hall, but this is sort of like
Sure.
um, Arsenio Hall slash cooking show where the artists get to come on and perform whatever show. I mean, I'm sorry, whatever song that they're known for first. Then we sit down and do the couch thing and talk about their careers, what they've been doing, where they're going, and then we transition into the kitchen and they get to prepare whatever their favorite dish is. So look forward to that. That's called Cooking with My Homies, and that's just what that is. We're gonna be cooking with your favorite artist, whoever it may be. And if you're one of the lucky ones, you get to come up on the stage and help your favorite artist prepare that dish.
That's
So
really nice.
that's
That's a
cooking.
very,
That's
very cool
cooking with my
idea.
homies.
Yeah, I wish you the best of
Yes.
luck with that. That sounds really exciting. You should present at the Food Network.
Yeah, and actually, that's where it's going because here it is, another situation where I'm coupling the music industry with the television industry. You know, so you get to have your music, you get to see your favorite artists, and you get to see if they could cook or not.
Yeah, I mean that's. It reminds me of a way of live at Daryl's house. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Similar.
Similar, but
Yeah,
but
it's
but
similar.
but way different too. Um, and
Yes.
the Cooking Network. I mean, they try to make up all these game shows and contests and all that. This would be refreshing, you know. It would really be awesome. So, if people want to get in contact with you, get your music, or learn more about you, or give you a cooking show on network TV, how would they go ahead and get to you?
Well, I could be reached at worldmovement.com. That's our website. Or you could hit me at Lamont at worldmovement.com. Or you could even call our office, which is someone's there 24/7 actually, and that's 323-957-7322. And that's worldmovement.com or World Movement Publishing. On the radio shows is I Am Indie, which is on Blog Talk Radio, and Can a Player Play, which is also on Blog Talk Radio.
Awesome.
Come through and check us out.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I had a hell of a lot of fun, and can we do it in the future again?
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to having you on our show too. And I'm gonna make you come out of those earphones and pick up your horn and play some music for us.
I'll dust that baby off. All right, so look, take it
All
easy.
right.
I guess a pleasure, and had a lot of fun, and hopefully we do it again real soon.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Folks, so we've just been talking to Lamont Patterson. Um, Spectacular guy. I mean, really eclectic minded, doing tons of things, helping people while experiencing life to its fullest. It's something that someone should always be striving to do. And I want to thank everyone for listening today. You know, I didn't announce our 800 number once, but certainly I'll be posting this up on SoundCloud, Mixcloud. It'll be on Facebook. It'll be on Twitter. It will be on iTunes. So you can go ahead and listen to it there. If you have any questions, feel free to. You can always email me at michael@michaelblumshow.com. I know it's a long name, but what the heck. Anyway, so I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll do this again next week, hopefully. And I'm just going to say goodbye now and wish everyone the best. And as I'm tempted to say at the end of each broadcast, that everything in your life is possible. Fewer things are probable. One thing is certain, though, and that's that you're alive. So go ahead out and live your life to the fullest. Of course, tomorrow's promised to nobody. Have a good day. Speak to you next week.